We now go deeper on the fallout of the assassination attempt against Republican candidate Donald Trump on Saturday. For this, we are joined by Danny Shaw, Latin American and Caribbean Studies professor at the City University of New York and international affairs analyst. Welcome, Danny.
Greetings, Luis. Thank you for the invite.
It's a pleasure. 2 days have passed since the Trump rally shooting. In your view, what is the immediate impact that this incident has had in the U.S. political landscape looking ahead to the November elections?
Well, we're beyond the immediate impact. Right now, we're at a more sober moment where the ruling class is closing its ranks. The number one order coming from the true ruling class, from the very summits of political power in the Democratic Party, from the ownership of MSNBC and CNN and the New York Times, and then across the aisle, Fox News, and at the Republican National Convention where Trump's expected to pick his VP. The message is clear: cool off the political rhetoric. This is the biggest existential crisis in U.S. capitalism since when? Since 1968, when RFK, Robert F. Kennedy, the candidate, is assassinated. Martin Luther King, within a few months, was assassinated. So right now it's clear. There's no more talk of Democrats versus Republicans. Even if we listened this morning to Amy Goodman on Democracy Now!, it sounded like she even had struck a different chord. So it's a very quote-unquote American moment. At least that's what the ruling class is trying to project. They know that an all-time low, this is an all-time low in terms of global and even national confidence in the American imperial project. I think Ukraine becomes secondary. Everything becomes secondary. The ruling class is closing ranks, Luis.
Professor, how can something like this happen with such heavy security detail and witnesses reporting after the incident that they had warned the Secret Service of suspicious movements on the building of a man?
Well, Fox is blaming the local police. CNN is blaming the intelligence apparatuses. So perhaps there are some divisions there. And I think it's significant to say that in 2016 and in 2020, the CIA and the FBI both took out big ads in the New York Times against Trump, something unprecedented for these quote unquote, apolitical agencies who cause all types of assassinations of other presidents across the world. I think it's important to highlight that we live in a world where one billionaire's ear or outer ear is worth more than how many lives in Gaza. I would say that this estimate of 40,000 murdered by the axis of genocide is extremely low. I think it's more in the hundreds of thousands. I think there's demographic proof of that. This is showing the true nature of the U.S. system, of capitalism, of imperialism. And they see that right now it's not worth arguing over the hundreds of billions of dollars that they've sent for a proxy war against Russia and Ukraine. Everything right now is secondary or tertiary. The fundamental contradiction has to be resolved, and that's restoring to the American people confidence in this fundamentally anti-democratic system.
Saturday's incidents puts in evidence how deep the political divide has grown in the United States, not only on domestic issues, as you were saying, but also on international ones, like you were referring to the Ukraine crisis and the genocide in Palestine being carried out by the Israeli regime. During the past month, we have seen how thousands have taken to the streets and university campuses to denounce the genocide, and we have also seen the reaction of mainstream media. What is your take on the matter?
More than 9,000 of us have been arrested in the United States since October in defense of Palestinian life, the right of Palestinian people to just exist, exposing all this hypocrisy of never again and never again, which never applied to the Palestinians or any native people across the world. But right now, that's the last thing on the minds of the American people. All attention is on Milwaukee. Trump has mentioned perhaps J.D. Vance, the Ohio extreme right-wing Trumpite himself, but I don't think Vance right now is going to be a ruling class pick. His rhetoric is too hot. He is blaming the Democrats and their rhetoric. I mean, as of 48 hours ago, the messaging from the Democrats was that King Trump was the greatest peril to democracy, as if we ever even had democracy in this country for everyday people. So there is no question that the liberal rhetoric did play a certain role. Here we have Thomas Crooks, a 20-year-old who tried to definitively insert himself into history, something akin to Gustav Princeps. I mispronounced his name, but the young man who sparked the quote-unquote sparked the World War I with the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. And how could security be so lapsed? We don't know yet if it was 6 shots or 7 shots that rang out. There's different eyewitness testimony. This has certainly shaken the very foundations of the ruling class. All of U.S. democracy in front of the world has the lowest credibility rate ever. One candidate can't even find the stage, can't even mount the stage. And that's not to be disrespectful to an 81-year-old, but it's asking, why have they kept Joe Biden there to debate, to embarrass himself and his family when this individual clearly has Parkinson's or whatever mental diagnosis? And that's because the ruling class doesn't care. This isn't about Trump and Biden. This is about the oligarchs and their agenda to continue pillaging the entire globe, cutting our benefits at home. They have hundreds of billions for war against China, war against Russia, war against Venezuela, war against everybody, and chiefly, of course, against the Palestinian people. Where is the money for our needs, our educational needs? All of our children, including this 20-year-old, alienated, isolated. How could he go and retrieve this weapon all on his own and from 3 football fields away, 300 yards, attempt to assassinate, who even before the assassination attempt was probably going to be the next president of the United States? Now it seems that he's almost the candidate of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is expressing nothing but sympathy. Joe Biden wrote a letter to Melania Biden. So it really, it's like a new smokescreen where all use of critical reason has been lost due to the events on Saturday.
Professor, one final question. Gun control has been a long-running issue in the States. I believe figures show that number of guns widely outnumber that of U.S. citizens currently in the States. And so far this year, over 9,000 people have died in gun violence-related incidents. Trump himself has been a long advocate for gun ownership. Do you believe by any chance what happens out there might have an influence on future policies if elected?
That's a very interesting question, Luis. I mean, Trump himself, the most divisive politician and trickster and con man, the divider and conqueror in chief, the demagogue in chief, suddenly is saying, no, we don't want any violence, and he struck a different chord as well. So it seems like he had a come to Jesus moment as well. But getting blasted in the head like that could have that psychological impact on even the most stubborn of us. But yes, guns, the United States of guns. There's anywhere between 400 million to 500 million guns awash in U.S. society. That doesn't count the tens of millions of guns that the United States exports annually, tens of millions of guns that they export illegally, not covertly. Guns play a huge role. How did this young man who clearly had some type of mental health issues, social isolation, because that's a pandemic in our society. So many of these social phenomena. Last year, Luis, we had 675 random shootings. Really, how is this any different in this context of the most violent country in the history of the world? As Dr. Martin Luther King said, the greatest purveyor of violence in the history of the world. So I think this was a case of what Malcolm X famously said, the chickens came home to roost.
As always, Danny, thank you very much for your input from the South. Thank you very much for being with us and going over this important topic.
Thank you, Luis. A pleasure.
It's always our pleasure. For now, let's take